The thuggish Donald Trump administration has been attacking South Africa ever since he was inaugurated. Of course, you've got South Africans standing behind him like Elon Musk, who've been encouraging that because they don't like the fact that black folks are running that particular country. And so Donald Trump has been touting the, quote, genocide against white farmers in South Africa, welcoming 59 Afrikaners, white folks, to the country. Now, mind you, these are the same people who stole the land in South Africa. White people in South Africa make up 7% of the population. They own 72% of the land. So Donald Trump has been floating these lies. Today, the president of South Africa came to the Oval Office to sit across from that white nationalist, that white supremacist. And this man, this dignified black man, had to listen to this idiot, the one who called African shithole countries, who called countries in Africa shithole countries, who trashed and lied about Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, who called for the death penalty of the 5 black and brown young men, then called the Central Park 5, now known as Exonerated 5. The same man who was accused by HUD of not renting apartments to black people. Yeah, that same person who barely has any black people in his administration. Yeah, that same one. He had to listen to this pathetic ass man lie about what's happening in his country, South Africa, because Donald Trump has no problem standing with racists and white supremacists because his administration is filled with them, people like Stephen Miller and others. Listen to this trash that happened today.
We've had tremendous complaints about Africa, about other countries too, from people. They say there's a lot of bad things going on in Africa, and that's what we're going to be discussing today. When you say we don't take others, all you have to do is take a look at the southern border. We let 21 million people come through our border, totally unchecked, totally unvetted. They came from all over the world. In many cases, they're criminals. They come from prisons. They come from mental institutions. They come from street gangs. They're drug dealers. So don't say that we didn't take them. We're trying to get them out as fast as we can. And we're doing record business on that. And we just won a big case. We're allowed to send back hundreds of criminals to Venezuela. Just won that today in the Supreme Court. I'm happy to hear. But we do have a lot of people are very concerned with regard to South Africa, and that's really the purpose of the meeting, and we'll see how that turns out. But we have many people that feel they're being persecuted, and they're coming to the United States. So we take from many locations if we feel there's persecution or genocide going on. And we had a lot of people. I must tell you, Mr. President, we have had a tremendous number of people, especially since they've seen this. Generally, they're white farmers, and they're fleeing South Africa, and it's a very sad thing to see. But I hope we can have an explanation of that, because I know you don't want that. It's a kind of a different meeting. Normally, we have meetings, we talk about trade, and we'll be talking about trade and other things. But that certainly will be a subject that comes up. Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah,
Brian?
Thank you very much. I'd like to get your thoughts on Letitia James. Director Polte, according to him, Letitia James says that the alleged mortgage fraud was simply a mistake. I want to get your thoughts on that. She put down that her father was her husband in order, and this is very similar to, I guess, the false attacks they had on you.
Well, I don't know what it is currently, but Letitia James, who's the Attorney General of New York State, it seemed, I'm not involved in that at all. I know that it's being handled by various groups, I guess, but it's major fraud, mortgage documents, and fraudulent everything. Yeah, I think she said the father was her husband, which she had to have a husband, or so she chose her father, and she put it down, and she had didn't she sign in Virginia, yet she said she lived in Virginia, yet she's the New York State Attorney General, and she did that for tax reasons, so she could take advantage of taxes. And she had the wrong number of units. She had a much different number, which wouldn't have allowed her to qualify and scam the government. So I don't know. I think she's very bad for New York, but I really don't know too much about it. But I appreciate the question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. President, what's the next step for you to be convinced that there's no genocide?
Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. So May 25th will be the celebration of Africa Day, which pretty much a lot of celebration will be taking place around the world, including here in the United States. What is your message to the entire African continent, African people, in this important occasion?
Well, I want to see peace, and I want to see happiness. I want to see health, and you have incredible land. There's tremendous value. A lot of countries don't have that value in the land, the value you have. We have a situation, I think you probably heard about it. We've done, through some very talented people, helped settle a war that's been raging for years, Rwanda and the Congo. And I think we've done it. Believe it or not, I think we've done it. And could you just say a few words about that, my friend?
Yes. A couple of weeks ago, the two parties signed a declaration of principle in which they've agreed on the way forward. And they have both submitted draft peace agreements, and we have put together one that incorporates both of their suggestions, and we've given it to them. So we're in the process of finalizing this
Looking
peace
good,
agreement.
right?
Looking very good.
We have to thank you for even those efforts, because the African continent, particularly SADC, our Southern African Development Community, has for years been seeking to foster peace in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So all efforts, including those from outside the continent and inside the continent, are really worthwhile. We are removing our troops from there so that peace can then prevail in that whole area. And we hope that with the support of the international community, we will really have peace in that area. It's so vital, it's so important for the whole region.
Well, we sent our people there, and I think we did a very good job. I was headed by my friend, and that was great. That was great. I mean, I'm just hearing phenomenal reports, because all I'm hearing is death, and they're chopping heads off, and it's horrible over there. And it was really brave of you to go there, and I really appreciate it. And it looks like we have something very, very substantial. We also talked about trade with them in terms of rare earth and all, but really more for it's like if you take a look at what we just did with Pakistan and India, we settled that whole thing, and I think I settled it through trade. We're doing a big deal with India, we're doing a big deal with Pakistan, and I said, what are you guys doing? Somebody had to be the last one to shoot. But the shooting was getting worse and worse, bigger and bigger, deeper and deeper into the countries. And we spoke to them, and I hate to say we got it settled, and then 2 days later, something happens, and they say it's Trump's fault. But Pakistan has got some excellent people and some really good, a great leader. And India is my friend, Modi. And he's a
mutual friend?
Yeah, he's a great guy. And I called them both, and we just did something good. We're trying to settle Russia, Ukraine. We spoke with President Putin for 2.5 hours the day before yesterday. I think we made a lot of progress, but that's a bloodbath. 5,000 people are being killed a week, 5,000 soldiers a week, not including people in cities and towns that are also being killed. So we're trying to help. And it doesn't affect us. It's not our people. It's not our soldiers. It's Ukraine and it's Russia. But if we can save 5,000 souls, we'll do it. We're pretty good at it. But that's a bad situation. That is a really bad situation.
Well, you'd recall when President Zelensky was coming to South Africa, that's when I spoke to you.
That's right.
We both agreed that we need to push the peace message so that there can really be peace. And we've been involved in the Ukraine-Russia conflict for quite a while through my Minister of State Security here. We've been dealing with them, the exchange of children who were taken away, going through names and addresses and all that. So we've been invested in that whole process as well. And the moves that you are making are fully supported by us because we would like to see the end of that war.
True. I called Zelensky, and they said, he's in South Africa. I said, what the hell is he doing in South Africa?
He was talking to us.
We got to speak. I said, that's a strange one. I said, what are you doing in South Africa?
Yes.
That's a strange one.
He's trying to make peace. We taking him. You know, we were lucky because we had the great Nelson Mandela, who taught us how to create peace, to make peace. So we were imparting some of those lessons to him, some of those learnings, and I specifically mentioned to him that this is how Nelson Mandela taught us that when you want to have a peace in a country, do it on an unconditional basis and sit down and talk. And that's precisely what I'm sure he's going to heed.
Well, we're going to see what happens with that one. It's there's a lot of hatred. There's a lot of death. It's a bloodbath.
It is.
I get the,
unfortunately.
I get the satellite pictures of that field, of that killing field. Mm-hmm. You never saw anything like it in your life. It's horrible. It's a horrible thing that it goes on, but I think we've made big progress. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Gaza
No, not you. Right here. He's from South Africa. Go ahead, please.
What are you expecting on the ICJ case? Are you expecting South Africa to drop that? Is that what you're trying to reason?
On which case?
The ICJ case against Israel,
International
Criminal Court.
I don't expect anything, to be honest. I really don't. I don't know. It's, they've got a case. There's a lot of anger there, tremendous anger. I don't expect anything. We'll see what happens. We'll have a ruling, and who knows what the ruling is going to mean. Yeah.
On that subject of Gaza, Mr. President, are you going to be speaking to Prime Minister Netanyahu about Israel's renewed offensive there? There's been a lot of concern from European countries. The Pope has expressed concern. Are you going to be asking Prime Minister Netanyahu to tone down the offensive in Gaza, to let more aid in?
Was that a question or a statement?
It's a question.
This guy's, you never change.
Mr. President, decide what will
Please.
it take for you to be convinced that there's no white genocide in South Africa?
Well, I can answer that for the president. It's for him. No, seriously.
I'd rather have him answer.
Yeah, I'd rather answer that. It will be.
Our president will respond to you.
Yeah, let me,
Thank you, Mr. President.
it will take President Trump listening to the voices of South Africans, some of whom are his good friends, like those who are here. When we have talks between us on around a quiet table, it will take President Trump to listen to them. I'm not going to be repeating what I've been saying. I would say if there was Afrikaner farmer genocide, I can bet you these three gentlemen would not be here, including my Minister of Agriculture. He would not be with me. So it will take him, President Trump, listening to their stories, to their perspective. That is the answer to your question.
But, Mr. President, I must say that we have, wait. We have thousands of stories talking about it.
Sure.
And we have documentaries, we have news stories. And is Natalie here, somebody here to turn that? I could show you a couple of things. And it has to be responded to.
Yeah, sure.
Let me see the articles, please, if you would. And turn the lights down. Turn the lights down and just put this on. It's right behind you, Johan.
There's nothing this parliament can do. With or without you, people are going to occupy land. We require no permission from you, from the president, from no one. We don't care. We can do whatever you want to do. Who are you to tell us whether we can occupy land or not? We are going to occupy land. Yes. South Africa, occupy land. That's who we are. Honorable member, can withdraw my membership from this useless parliament? Honorable. Yes, honorable member. Must never be scared to kill. A revolution demands that at some point there must be killing, because the killing is part of a revolutionary act. Shoot to kill. Yamaza. Kill the poor, the farmer. Kill the poor, the former. Pa, 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 pa. Today, your master, kill the poor, the farmer, kill the poor, the farmer. The mayor of DA in PE is a white man. So these people, when you want to hit them hard, go after a white man. They feel a terrible pain because you have touched a white man. Not because Mashaba and Soli will not be touched. They will be touched, don't worry. But we are starting with this whiteness. We are cutting the throat of whiteness. It's like that. Shoot to kill. Yamasa. Kill the poor. The farmer. Kill the poor. The farmer. Pa, pa, pa. Shoot to kill. Yamasa. Kill the poor. The farmer. Kill the poor. The farmer. Pa, 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 pa.
And Senju was not called for the killing of white people, at least for now. I can't guarantee the future.
Yeah, but I mean, you'd understand somebody watching that, especially as it gets shared on Twitter, they freak out. It sounds like a genocidal
But it is.
Who will expropriate land without compensation, whether they like it or not. If they object, they can seek refuge in America.
Now this is very bad. These are burial sites right here. Burial sites. Over 1,000 of white farmers, and those cars are lined up to pay love on a Sunday morning. Each one of those white things you see is a cross, and there's approximately 1,000 of them. They're all white farmers, the family of white farmers. And those cars aren't driving, they're stopped there to pay respects to their family member who's killed. And it's a terrible sight. I've never seen anything like it. Both sides of the road you have crosses. Those people were all killed.
Have they told you where that is, Mr. President? No, I'd like to know where that is, because this I've never seen. But, okay.
I mean, it's in South Africa.
We need to find out. I don't know. I don't know. Okay.
Mr. President, the Pentagon announced that it would be accepting a Qatari jet to be used as Air Force One. Perhaps
What are you talking about?
Can we have a South Africa question, please? Mr. President,
the Pentagon spokesperson.
What does this have to do with the Qatari jet? They're giving the United States Air Force a jet, okay? And it's a great thing. We're talking about a lot of other things. It's NBC trying to get off the subject of what you just saw. You are a real, you're a terrible reporter. Number one, you don't have what it takes to be a reporter. You're not smart enough. But for you to go into a subject about a jet that was given to the United States Air Force, which is a very nice thing, they also gave $5.1 trillion worth of investment in addition to the jet. Go back. You ought to go back to your studio at NBC because Brian Roberts and the people that run that place, they ought to be investigated. They are so terrible the way you run that network, and you're a disgrace. No more questions for me. Go ahead. Go ahead, talk about that.
Please, may we have a South African question?
His name is Peter something. He's a terrible.
If they're committing genocide, why invite him to the White House? I'll be quiet. Sure, that's my question now.
Let's go.
Thank you so much, President Trump. Annika Larson from ENCA in South Africa. Thank you very much for hosting us. What would you like President Ramaphosa to do about the situation that we've just seen on the screen?
I don't know. Look, these are articles over the last few days. Death of people. Death. 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 Horrible death. Death. I don't know.
But you know that there are black people who are
White
dying
South
most.
Africans are fleeing because of the violence and racist laws. And this is all. I mean, I'll give these to you. So when you say, what would I like to do? I don't know what to do. Look at this. White South African couple say that they were attacked violently.
President Trump, when will you go and see for yourself if it is?
Well, I could do that. Look, here's burial sites all over the place. These are all white farmers that are being buried.
President Trump.
And he asks about a jet that was given.
My first question is about Africa.
We're not interested in the
You are so bad. You're such a bad reporter.
If they're committing genocide, why invite them? Sir, if they are committing genocide, why invite the South Africans to the White House?
May I finish, please, President Trump? President Trump.
This is one after another. This family was wiped out. I'm just looking.
Can we get a report from President Trump? Can you give us your reaction to those videos, Mr. President?
President Trump, would you?
Well, I think the videos are so. No. When you look at the videos, I mean, how does it get worse? And these are people that are officials, and they're saying that kill the white farmer and take their land. That's what it is. And I have other friends in South Africa. I have people that left. One in particular that says you can't go there. He said they want to take your land. They take your land and they kill you. It's okay, and they say it's okay to do. Now we're going to talk about it. But this is a tremendous look. This is story recent. These are all people that recently got killed.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it can get any worse. These are okay. And you know, the men that you saw, the people that you saw in that movie, those are officials. Those are people that were in office. They had one march. They had a dance in your parliament, whatever you may call it, legislature.
But let me clarify that.
Yeah.
Let me clarify that, because what you saw, the speeches that were being made, one, that is not government policy. We have a multi-party democracy in South Africa that allows people to express themselves, political parties to adhere to various policies, and in many cases, or in some cases, those policies do not go along with government policy. Our government policy is completely against what he was saying, even in the parliament. And they're a small minority party, which is allowed to exist in terms of our constitution.
But you do allow them to take land.
No.
You do allow them to take land.
Nobody can take land.
And then when they take the land, they kill the white farmer. And when they kill the white farmer, nothing happens to them.
No. There is
nothing happens to them.
There is criminality in our country. People who do get killed, unfortunately, through criminal activity, are not only white people. Majority of them are black people. And we have now
the farmers are black. The farmers are not black. I don't say that's good or bad, but the farmers are not black. And the people that are being killed in large numbers, and you saw all those grave sites, and those are people that loved ones going, I guess on a Sunday morning, they told me, to pay respect to their loved ones that were killed. Their heads chopped off. They died violently. And, you know, I mean, we're here to talk about it, and I didn't know we'd get involved here. But I will say this, that if the news wasn't fake, like NBC, which is fake news, totally, one of the worst, ABC, NBC, CBS, horrible. But if they weren't fake news like this jerk that we have here, if we had real reporters, they'd be covering it. But the fake news in this country doesn't talk about that. They don't want to talk about it, but now they have to talk about it. But they won't. This won't even be a subject. They'll have him talking about why did a country give a free, think of this, why did a country give an airplane to the United States Air Force? Okay, the United States, not to me, to the United States Air Force, so they could help us out, because we need an Air Force One until that's Air Force One, it's being built. 2 of them being built. But Boeing's a little bit late, unfortunately. So why did they give us a plane to the United States Air Force? That's what that idiot talks about after viewing a thing where thousands of people are dead.
I'm sorry, I don't have a plane to give you.
I wish you did. I'd take it. I would take it. If your country offered the United States Air Force a plane, I would take it.
Okay. But coming back to this issue, which I really would like us to talk about, and talk about it very calmly. We were taught by Nelson Mandela that whenever there are problems, people need to sit down around a table and talk about them.
Well, there are problems.
And this is precisely what we would also like to talk about, including, of course, trade matters, investment matters. So the issues that concern you as the United States.
Those are all recent. Those are all deaths.
Yeah, in many ways, I mean, one should say you are a partner of South Africa, and you are raising concerns, and these are concerns that we are willing to talk to you about. Let me just add quickly, you know, the criminality that we are experiencing in our country needs quite a lot of technological capability. And in one of our areas in South Africa, we're using US technology, which is able to, in many ways, identify where shootings are happening and all that. And I'd like to talk about that, because there is support that we can get from you as the United States to help us deal with all these acts of criminality. And that is what I believe partnership is all about. And we are here as a partner so that we can help each other whenever there are challenges. So I'd like us to discuss it, and of course outside of the media, so that we sit down and have a really good discussion that will lead to good outcomes.
Folks, my pound, Dr. Larry J. Walker, Associate Professor, University of Central Florida, out of Orlando. Rebecca Carruthers, Executive Vice President, Fair Election Center, out of Washington, D.C. Derek Jackson, State Representative, Georgia District 68, out of Alabama. It was, the folks understand, it was painful to have to watch this entire conversation. It was more than an hour. We actually streamed it on the Black Star Network. It was hard to watch a black man have to sit there and listen to lies. President Ramaphosa, he had to remain dignified. He could not respond, even how Zelensky responded. Because you see, countries like South Africa, America uses its money to force them to do their bidding. There's foreign aid they receive. There's money that they receive. These are the things that they do. And so, having to listen to this shameful, despicable man, just, they tell me, well, who the hell is they? Who's they? You literally had white South Africans in the room saying, no, that ain't true. But this idiot believes whoever he talked to last, that's who he believes. And see, this right here is why I will never call him president. Because he is a disgrace to the office. He is a stain on the world. He is an orange stain. He is a brown streak in white shorts to the world. And he sat there and just constantly lied. President of South Africa, talk about trade, talk about security. And to make matters worse, to constantly go back to criminality, and not want to deal with the history of that country. But the reason why it's even more so shameful with what happened, because that was a white man who sat in that same office and who vetoed a bill that sanctioned the racists in South Africa. He vetoed it because he stood with the racist government, and that was Ronald Reagan. But see, that's when you had a different Republican Party, because Republicans and Democrats overrode Reagan's veto that led to sanctions against South Africa, that racist apartheid regime. Donald Trump absolutely is in the Reagan camp. He stands up for white people in South Africa. He doesn't give a damn about black South Africans. That's really, Rebecca, that was the thing for me, just having, here's Ramaphosa trying to remain composed and calm and listening to this man, knowing full well, I think he wanted to reach over and choke the shit out of him for just lying on his country.
I mean, if I was President Ramaphosa, I would have had a hard time keeping my composure, knowing that this is a buffoon clown and probably a soiled diaper trying to tell me the history of my country when I have lived it. Quite frankly, I'm very happy that I had the experience to study abroad in South Africa through Howard University School of Law about 10 years after apartheid. And just watching that country having to rebuild, knowing economically there's still parts of it that's still tied to white supremacy, it was very hard to listen to the current resident of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue spew constant lies that aren't true, that are factually inaccurate. But, God willing, President Ramaphosa will be here years much later after Trump has departed.
Again, when we sit here and have to just watch this crap and deal with this idiot, really is pathetic. And I just, I was so angry having to watch that. And guys, do me a favor. We were live streaming the news conference of the president, Ramaphosa, his post-news conference. It looked like it just ended. Cue that up so I can take some of that. I wish someone told me that they were actually live. So it looks like the feed just ended. But the thing for me, Larry, it was shameful. And you know what he wanted to say. There were stories that were reported where he talked about what he was going to say, but he knew in that moment. And all these people talk about, oh, he was ambushed and he didn't know. No, he knew what he was walking into. He did. Hell, I said last night to Jahan LeBlanc what was going to happen. So we knew what was going to happen, but he had to remain calm and dignified when sitting across from an absolute idiot.
Roland, we often think about, world leaders and people in positions of power. There are times in which you have to bite your tongue. And in this case, he certainly spent, most of his time in the White House doing just that, because he knows he has the lives of millions of South Africans in his hand. And you're right, Roland, in terms of someone who had to live under, apartheid, de jure segregation, to endure what he had to endure today in the White House. And I want to go back to a point you made earlier about Ronald Reagan. We have to remember there was the CDC and people like Randall Robinson and others that helped end apartheid in South Africa and also helped free Nelson Mandela. And years later, post Obama and Biden, et cetera, we now, in terms of Americans, have to be exposed to a lot of really crazy conspiracy theories. And listen, the United States has the most complete, apparatus in the world as it creates in terms of collecting data and information. And he's printing out stuff from off the internet. He's got copies, printouts in his hand. When once again, he has access to all kinds of information about what's going on in every country in the world. And this speaks to this idea of the difference between what, a society moving forward, a multiracial, multi-ethnic society moving forward, and what we saw today in the White House, which is also reinforces the idea that people of African descent aren't seen as human, that we're seen as less than. When you are talking about white Afrikaners, and we know there were a few dozen that came to the United States just a week or two ago, and not talking about the fact that that land was taken from, Black South Afrikaners. And then once again, that land is still owned post-apartheid. That land is still owned by white Afrikaners. And so once again, the power dynamic in terms of land ownership, which we know in any country is the primary thing which is primarily important, is still unbalanced. And once again, you have the president of South Africa being forced and humiliated in many respects to listen to a lot of these conspiracy theories, which have been disproven, and forced to kind of endure that. And once again, as you said, as a Black man who had to endure apartheid and who has risen to this position of power, to be forced to listen to this in the White House.
Derek, again, this is the crap that we have to deal with the fool who's sitting in the Oval Office.
Yeah, you're right, Roland. And I do appreciate that you played the full interview. This is my third time watching it. But the reason why I appreciate you playing it is because your listeners, your audience need to know how this guy is, right? This is the video is on, the microphone is hot, and we continue to watch this individual that's occupying the Oval Office continue to proliferate false, misleading claims and lies in the Oval Office. Over 30,000 lies. And I appreciate President Ramaphosa fact-checking him in real time, saying, tell me where this is, because this doesn't look familiar. See, that we know if something is happening in Georgia and they say, hey, this is happening in Atlanta, I know Atlanta, and somebody say, this is happening in Atlanta, I'm going to ask, well, where in Atlanta? Because it doesn't look like Atlanta. We got to understand, Roland, that the individuals that's behind this thing about genocide is David Duke, Carlson Tucker, Elon Musk, Stephen Miller. If you understand those four, they're proliferating this, and they were prepared to put this because they had a television already in there. He said, dim lights, roll the tape. And so we now need world leaders, when they go in that Oval Office, they need to be blunt with him. Because if you continue to play nice with a bully and you don't punch back with a bully, they're going to continue to do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when he just flat out lied about Canada and the prime minister sitting right there. And again, he was trying to be nice about it when he corrected him. In that particular video that was shown, there was a video of Julius Malema. And he sent this tweet out afterward. He said, a group of older men meet in Washington to gossip about me. No significant amount of intelligence evidence has been produced about white genocide. We will not agree to compromise our political principles on land expropriation without compensation for political expediency. What we saw, Rebecca, in that Oval Office, we saw the Minister of Agriculture talk about what is happening there. Then you had the richest man in South Africa, that white guy Johan, say, no, that's not genocide. And so again, Trump is a liar. And what people don't also understand is they handpicked the media that was there as well. So understand the type of questions you were getting. A lot of the people from the United States were these crazy ass right-wingers who kiss his butt every day.
The other thing that's disturbing,
who also mainly work for white nationalist organizations.
Absolutely. The thing that's especially dangerous here is when you have the use of technology like AI that's being used like this, like with Grok, that pushed out last week. It didn't matter what you were looking up last week. It kept connecting to this insidious lie that's not happening.
And the same Grok, when asked, said that it had been changed for his own Grok told Elon's Grok told on itself.
Yeah, Grok is performing like a child. When you tell a child the lie, the child's going to tell you the lie and say, hey, guess who told me the lie? And so the Grok is letting us know that Elon Musk and other white supremacists have fed this lie because they're trying to feed this into the internet. So then when you do searching on what's happening in South Africa, all of a sudden you have these AI lies that have been generated, have been force fed. Like what's happening is, and an erasure that's happening. Just like we talk about the erasure that's happening in this country under the Trump administration, we're seeing the same thing that's happening in South Africa. But what's making it especially harmful is that when you add the advent of Starlink and the other technologies that Elon Musk is holding sub-Saharan hostage over its usage, now we're going to start to see extortion for people to actually feed in and buy into the lies.
The economic freedom fighters, Larry, released this statement here on social media. They said the economic freedom fighters has taken note of the press briefing held jointly by the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, and the president, and they say the president of the United States, Donald Trump. The meeting, which came under the pretext of discussing diplomatic, trade, and economic relations, ended up being a discussion about the president and commander-in-chief of the EFF, Julius Malema, and his correct and principled position regarding the return of the land to African people and the return of the means of production into the hands of the African majority. In what comes as no surprise, Cyril Ramaphosa and his delegation, which was constituted by the likes of Stellenbosch racist billionaire Johan Rupert, Donald Trump's golfing buddy Ernie Els, and the Minister of Agriculture and leader of the racist Democratic Alliance, John Steenhuisen, was an interaction dominated by white privileged men who've amassed wealth at the expense of African people, who spent a majority of the time expressing their hatred of the EFF and of its leader, Julius Malema. Trump proceeded to play numerous clips of the president of the EFF wherein our leader spoke correctly about the unequal distribution of land in South Africa and sang the chant, "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer," which is a song that expresses the desire to destroy the system of white minority control over the resources of South Africa. This liberation chant was considered as part of African heritage by the Equality Court, which also which also said the song could not be interpreted literally. The Supreme Court of Appeal and the Constitutional Court of South Africa then ratified this decision. In an act of cowardice, Cyril Ramaphosa blatantly denounced the rulings of the courts of the country he is a president of, and this was then followed by insults from John Steenhuisen, who then confirmed that they reached a pact with the African National Congress to keep the EFF out of power. This pact was a clear collusion to prevent genuine transformation in South Africa. Additionally, the meeting between Ramaphosa and Trump has led to the inadvertent confirmation of the consolidation of the 2024 alliance between white minority capital and the neoliberal and counter-revolutionary ANC. Johan Rupert then followed, identifying the CIC Julius Malema as his enemy for over 10 years, and then citing their relationship since Julius Malema's days in the once vibrant ANC Youth League. The true intentions of the meeting were then revealed as Rupert went on to lobby for the allowing of Elon Musk's Starlink to operate in South Africa. The dominance of white male voices in the entire interaction proves and vindicates the EFF. The delegation was one that sought to make assurances to Trump that the transformation agenda of South Africa is one that can be compromised upon negotiation. All the utterances by Ramaphosa's delegation point to a devious plot to rekindle relations with a maniacal Trump administration by sacrificing our sovereignty at the altar of convenience. The South African delegation was at pains to explain how they have no interest in redressing the unequal patterns of land ownership in South Africa using what is now constitutionally provisioned as nil compensation through the Expropriation Act. The entire delegation failed dismally at countering the false narrative of a white genocide. Now, that is the statement that they released. First of all, genocide in South Africa, by contrasting the narrative through evidence-based statistics and data around crime in our country that affects all South Africans. South Africa has been embarrassed by a delegation that was contradicting itself, that abandoned judicial decisions, and at times was simply groveling and lying. The EFF is proud that its legislative and political agenda led by the president and commander-in-chief, Julius Malema, has shaken the quarters of imperialism in Washington. Our commander-in-chief can be considered in the lines of great revolutionaries, as Donald Trump in his illiterate rants has called for his arrest for daring to call for land expropriation without compensation. As a result, the EFF is concerned by this call that something must be done to stop the EFF president from chanting a liberation heritage song. Therefore, the EFF will continue to keenly follow the developments in Washington and reiterates that we will oppose any compromising of our laws to allow for Starlink to operate in South Africa and we will oppose any reversal or transformation legislation, including that which will allow for expropriation of land. We will defend our constitutional democracy, never bow and succumb to imperialism. All those opposed to the dominance of the few by the many must never fear and must chant loudly against the system of oppression. Abulu, kill the boer, kill the farmer. Victory is certain, issued by the economic freedom fighters. What we're dealing with, Larry, we're dealing with, as President Ramaphosa said to Trump, we have multiple parties. This is not America where you got Democrat and Republican. The reality is that there's been a lot of people in South Africa, a lot of black folks, who have not been happy with the ANC. One of the reasons the ANC had to form this coalition is because they lost the dominance there. In successive presidents, people have complained about corruption, they complain about high unemployment and crime. Black folks have been demanding change. And so what you're dealing with is a white man and Donald Trump. We know their statement is right. Absolutely illiterate. I love when they sat here and said, as Donald Trump in his illiterate rants, that's what he was, illiterate. For him to tell Ramaphosa, you just can't arrest this man, that tells you right here, he don't give a damn about freedom of speech in the United States.
No, and we are, with previous conversation, you talked about, rescinding a lot of these orders in states in terms of these consent decrees. So listen, Roland, in South Africa and these conversations, look, this is all about maintaining a racial caste system. And that is the bottom line. And obviously, you talked about Elon Musk. This is all about him gaining more power and a stronger foothold in not only countries and throughout the continent of Africa, but throughout various other countries. And so, listen, the president playing a video and once again printing out these articles from who knows where, it's all misinformation. None of it's based on any fact. There's no white genocide in South Africa. And once again, I find that your point in terms of land distribution, and we know that post-apartheid you had this racial conciliation events in terms of trying to kind of find a middle ground for white Afrikaners and black South Africans. But the fact of the matter is you can't have fairness and justice if one group controls the land. And so once again, whether, you talk about here in the United States, my ancestors not getting that 40 acres and a mule, or in South Africa, when you talked about more than 70% of the land is controlled by white South Afrikaners who make up less than 10% of the population. This statement, and I give them a lot of credit for providing a lot of context, is really important. Even when you talked about the song, Americans have no context for what the song really means. And then I'm glad they talked about in the press release what the song means. And that, they obviously talked about this necessarily no violent connotations to it. But Americans, particularly white Americans, have no context about what's happened in South Africa. And in terms of, once again, you talk about the ANC, in terms of making sure Black South Africans can live have a quality of life. And also we make sure that that land that belonged to them decades ago goes back to the people. You cannot have justice if you don't have the land that your ancestors spent years before those white Africans, South Africans came to the country, existed, built homes, and etc. So once again, this is the basis for maintaining a racial caste system in South Africa. The United States is applying political pressure to the South African government. And this, White House meeting was nothing but a ploy to play a bunch of misinformation, get it out there in the internet and people watching it over and over thousands, maybe millions of times to reinforce this idea that genocide is happening in South Africa. But the statement you just read provides, like I said, the context that is a lie, and that Americans, particularly Black folks, cannot fall for the okie doke.
There was a news conference we live streamed it on the Black Star Network where President Ramaphosa talked about this that joke of a meeting in the Oval Office. Of course, they had meetings afterwards. So here's some of that news conference.
Political collaboration on geopolitical matters. Yes, we found that our interests do coincide in as far as peace building and peacemaking is concerned. And we did compliment President Trump in being very forward in advocating for peace in our region between Rwanda and the DRC, and also Russia and Ukraine. And we outlined precisely what our involvement has been over the years. Speaks to both. We were condemned at an early stage, but I think much later people realized that the role that we play is a constructive role, because we have been able to deal with intricate issues that involve the two countries, about the children and prisoners of war. And he appreciated that, and he recognized the role that we play. And even as President Zelensky came to South Africa, he says he wanted to know where Zelensky was, and he heard that, oh, he's in South Africa. And before then, I had called,
All right, folks, that is, I don't know why the feed it keeps buffering, but bottom line is, if you want to see that full news conference, just go to our YouTube channel. You can actually see it. We live stream the full news conference. What we're dealing with here, Derek, is simple. There are white folks who don't want black people to be economically free. The reality is, and there are a lot of people who, even now, they still criticize Nelson Mandela because when he became president, obviously, his job is to keep this country together, but he did not move forward with an aggressive plan to confront the economic calamity or the distance between black folks and white folks there. And many people have talked about that, looking back, saying that was one of his biggest mistakes, that the radical freedom fighter became so moderate that at the end of the day, sure, it's great that you had a black president. It's great that the ANC then controlled the government. But as anybody knows, if you don't control the money, you actually do not have power.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Roland. And what we're watching, actually, to your point, we're seeing the restructuring of a new world order. I think, we're on a path to see a different kind of world. Our NATO allies are restructuring how they deal with the United States, Canada, France, UK. I mean, all these world leaders are watching this individual, how he deals with certain heads of state. And so they're having their private conversation and saying, we're going to circumnavigate the United States because we're not going to be part of the United States agenda. The second point is this, and you stated in the opening, this was all expected. Project 2025 was very clear. He said that they're going to detain 20 million citizens. They did not use the word migrants, immigrants. They said citizens. That includes all of us. They want to take 20 million of us, send them to El Salvador, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, wherever, and then import who they want to bring in. And so we're watching this new world order. The third part is this, Roland, what are we going to do? And we're going to keep coming back to that, because if we don't do something, life as we know it 5 to 10 years ago is going to be very different, because our NATO allies and heads of state are not going to tolerate this kind of foolishness when somebody is going to berate them publicly, lie on their country, and expect that for them not to do anything.
Rebecca, I go back to, you got to deal with the money. And I remember when I interviewed Winnie Mandela, and we talked about what was happening in the country. And one of the things that she said in that interview, and the only reason people could see the interview because there were white execs at CNN that refused to run the interview because I did not ask her about the trial that she had went on. I said, well, I wanted to ask her what the hell I wanted to ask her. And they never ran the interview. And I went to the president of CNN US joke with him and said, hey, give me the interview. I run on my TV One show. That's the only reason people could see that interview, because that happened. So when I interviewed her, what she said was, she said, you have to understand, a high illiteracy rate in South Africa was the result of young boys and girls who were literally in the streets fighting. So from the time they came of age, 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, until they became adults, they were fighting racist apartheid. So that's one of the reasons why. So when you look at this nation for African Americans and high unemployment rate, lack of economic opportunities, massive lack of housing, it literally is a grand contradiction when you look at the housing in black South Africa compared to white South Africa. It's no different. Hell, if you go to St. Thomas, and if you go look at St. Thomas, St. Croix, but then you go look at, I think it's St. John or St. J. That's where the white folks are. You can tell how the money changes based upon the roads, the houses, the lawns, all those things. And so South Africa is dealing with, that's what they're still dealing with. That is decades upon decades of black folks fighting for their freedom, not going to school, not building businesses. And here we are almost 3 decades after electing a black president, and they still are trying to gain economic footing, and land is a part of this. And a lot of these white folks, they do not want to give that land up because that is family riches.
So, Roland, I'm going to try to answer this, but I also know we have only a short period of time. I'm going to use.
I can skip other topics. We got 32 minutes, so if I want to stay on this, I can. Go ahead.
Okay. So
this ain't them other shows where no. Go ahead, make your point. Don't worry about it.
So we can get to the historical context and how the United States, as big brother, is responsible for what's happening in present-day South Africa. So I know last week Westmore didn't want to use the R word, reparations, but we're going to have to talk about this in this situation. So for the historical context, about 100 years ago, when we start looking at what the white Afrikaners did in South Africa, specifically, they studied what happened in post-Reconstruction Jim Crow in the South. They took the notes of what was happening in the United States in the 1870s and the 1880s, and they decided, hey, we're going to do this even better. So what they did, they came over to the United States, they learned, they went back over to South Africa in the early 1900s. They started to routinely strip away land from black folks in South Africa. So to provide context to what was happening in the United States at this time, when we think of 1919, when we had the Red Summers, where dozens and dozens of black cities, black towns, black economic engines were burned down by white nationalists in this country. The same thing was happening in South Africa, where you now had the white Afrikaner government decided they were going to break South Africa into different homelands. So basically in individual states. And they required that you had to have a passport to go from one state to another state in South Africa. As they were doing this, they were literally raping, they were murdering, they were burning down villages in the countryside as well as farmland. They literally took the farmland, stripped it from the black folks, and gave it to the white Afrikaners, primarily Dutch immigrants who came to South Africa a couple of centuries before. Once they did that and they started to jail dissidents, those who disagreed with what was happening in the South African government, once that happened, there was a huge land shift. And as we know, land really can't be created. Regardless of what's happening in Dubai, you really can't create land at that level. So the riches in South Africa was attached to the land. And that's before you even get to the mineral rights. So now when you fast forward to what was happening in the United States with the fight for liberation through the civil rights movement, you start to see a parallel happening in sub-Saharan Africa. So once you got to South Africa and you started to see Mandela, when you started to see Nelson Mandela join freedom fighters, and they started to fight for revolutionary and liberation rights in South Africa. He got jailed. All those things happened. While he was on Robben's Island, where he was incarcerated, you start to see they started to plot for the future of South Africa. They started to actually build the new constitution of what a liberated black South Africa looks like. So now you fast forward to the mid-90s. Once apartheid falls in South Africa, all of a sudden, instead of having Mandela, we got Nelson Mandela. I think that's very important because the freedom fighter was Mandela. It wasn't Nelson Mandela. So like what Roland said, you start to see more of a moderation. So then we fast forward to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The purpose of that commission was to give white Afrikaners immunity if they came forward and talked about all the bad things that they did under apartheid. There was no justice in this. There was no reparations in this. There was no restoration of family lands back to black South Africans. Instead, white folks just got up and said, oh, these are all the bad things that we did. Okay, now we're absolved. The issue with that is when you have almost a century of economic harm and there isn't economic reparations that are happening after almost a century of economic harm, is that now you have a poverty that is frozen into time, which is why now 3 decades later, you still have the same abject poverty in South Africa. So I had the experience of studying abroad in Cape Town at what was at HBCU under apartheid, University of the Western Cape. And my constitutional law professor happened to be Justice Yakub, who was on the Constitutional Court. During apartheid, he's one of those with Nelson Mandela, helped architect the new South Africa constitution, which was meant to be aspirational. It wasn't meant to be, hey, this is where we are as a nation. The issue that happened is by them not addressing the economic harms that occurred and coming up with economic reparations, is now you still have a huge gap between those who have and those who haven't, and it's largely based upon race. White Afrikaners are extremely wealthy. When you go to Cape Town, when you go to Durban, when you go to Joburg, to Johannesburg, when you look at where the money is consolidated, it's based upon white supremacy. Even though you have the class of honorary white people, which are people who are from India, and then you have the next part of the caste system, the coloreds, and then you have the black folks, you still see the coloreds, which would be, you still see the coloreds, which would be like singer, I think her name Tyla, she would be considered a color, which is why when she was on the Breakfast Club and she was asked if she was black, she struggled with that question because in South Africa, she is viewed as colored. Or you look at the comedian Trevor Noah, he would be considered colored. So the issue that's happening in South Africa is that century of economic harm has never been addressed. Until it's addressed, there's going to be continual and perpetual poverty of black South Africans.
Something happened before this meeting today in South Africa. President Ramaphosa, anyone with the embassy here. Bloomberg is reporting you are making a decision, and I implore you not to do this. And again, what have y'all always heard me say on this show? If you want to understand America, follow the money. If you're not having a money conversation, you're not having an American conversation. So Bloomberg reported this right here. South Africa to offer Musk Starlink deal before Trump meet. I am hoping they did not do this. This is what the story says. And there's a lesson here, because you talked about, Rebecca, what has happened with black people here. This should not happen. South Africa's government plans to offer Elon Musk a workaround of local black ownership laws for his Starlink service to operate in the country. Okay? Here's the whole piece. It says, news regarding the Starlink workaround regarding black ownership laws for Elon Musk to provide internet services in South Africa have boosted investor optimism regarding a favorable outcome resulting from the upcoming Ramaphosa-Trump meeting. The alternative to so-called black economic empowerment laws that in some cases require 30% black ownership is not specific to Starlink and Musk. It will be applied to all information and communication technology companies, including those from China and the Middle East. A so-called equity equivalent option would instead involve investments in infrastructure or training, or providing Starlink kits to rural areas in order to improve internet access. The auto industry in 2019 signed up for a similar workaround that involved the largest car manufacturers, including BMW AG, Ford Motor Company, and Toyota Motor Company, setting up a fund to invest in bringing disenfranchised groups into the sector. South Africa introduced BEE rules after the end of apartheid, during which black people were subjugated and excluded from the formal economy by the ruling white minority. Today, white people earn on average 5 times what black citizens do according to official statistics and own the vast majority of farmland despite making up 7% of the population. South Africa, do not do this. Do not do this deal. Now, I know somebody watching me going, dude, I don't understand, like, what's the problem with this deal? Now, according to another story, this is my problem with it. This story here says, under the equity equivalent model, companies like Starlink would invest in infrastructure development, skill training, or providing internet services to disadvantaged communities. South Africa, listen to me clearly. You're giving away the path to economic freedom for black South Africans. I dare say this is how, in the United States, we got front companies that took advantage of MWBE programs, and white women were benefiting. And then white women were setting up companies that white men controlled, or they went out and got a black face, but the white person was still making all the money. The issue we're dealing with here, and I totally understand it, there are infrastructure issues. There are issues in rural America. But South Africa, listen to me clearly. People in the United States in rural areas don't have internet service. Donald Trump is trying to pull back and peel back the billions that President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris signed into law, giving internet service to rural America. Why? Because Elon Musk wants to get the contract. This deal is a ruse. There are other examples of, oh, we're going to give you free internet or give you free equipment, then they start charging. South Africa cannot ease the 30% because black people, this will become a majority black nation, demographic-wise, that will never, ever get out of the hole of poverty. Derek, you're there in Georgia. I need South Africans, please, please, President Ramaphosa, please, ANC leaders, I need y'all to not do this. Go and sit and talk to people in Atlanta. Read Robert Jackson's book on Maynard Jackson. When Maynard Jackson said, I will let tumbleweeds roll down the runways of the airport before I allow it to be expanded without black participation. Atlanta, black people in Atlanta were getting 0.0012% of all city contracts in 1972. 1973, sworn in, begin to make changes. Banks would not put black people on their boards of directors. Maynard Jackson said, city treasurer, pull our money out of their banks. Within 2 weeks, they found black folks on their board. At city contracts, county contracts in Fulton County, airport contracts were because they had strict set-asides in there because they understood in Atlanta, you cannot be able to build wealth if you do not have access to the dollars. And what will happen here is Elon Musk will send out some free equipment. But what is the purpose of being able to have internet with free equipment from Starlink if I never will have an opportunity to own a business? President Ramaphosa and ANC, y'all cannot pull back on the 30% requirement. The numbers are the numbers. they're still going to own 70%. But if you do this, they will own 100%. And you will get crumbs. And a generation from now, like the generation today, is having to live with the deal Nelson Mandela cut. Don't be in a situation where 30 years from now, that generation is looking at the deal Ramaphosa cut in order to satisfy Donald Trump. Do not do this deal because it will be economically harmful to black South Africans. Derek?
Yeah, Roland, I definitely agree with you. They should take the Maynard Jackson approach. But let's look at the reality, Roland. This guy is transactional. In fact, he's so transactional, Roland, in the first 100 days of this administration, he has amassed $6 billion. Think about that for a second. We talk conflict of interest is he done blown that through the roof. I mean, the deals that continue to be outlined. And so when that whole $400 million jumbo jet cutter deal, I wasn't surprised because while he was over in the Middle East, Roland, he was making deals. He made a deal for a hotel. He made a deal for a golf course. And so Elon Musk is still part of this equation. They keep saying that Elon Musk is no longer in politics. Well, where was he today, Roland? He was right there. Why? Because he wants that Starlink in South Africa. But that's the sad part, that I believe President Ramaphosa is going to make the deal. And unfortunately, to your point, 10, 20, 30 years from now, they're going to look back at this time and the deal that was made is going to hurt South Africa.
Larry, I'm telling you, Larry, you cannot make deals with this thug. And all Elon Musk wants to is screw South Africa, the black folks. South Africa should do what Gambia is doing. And we had the ProPublica reporter on last week, how they've been trying everything to break Gambia. And Gambia's like, nope, we are not granting him a license to operate in Gambia. President Ramaphosa must remain strong. They cannot sign this deal.
You know, Roland, this is I talked earlier about, leadership. And, what we're seeing here with this White House and particularly Elon Musk, the last couple of weeks, trying to exploit African nations, exploit the countries, exploit their wealth, and we can't allow it. And, Roland, this is really important when we talk about in terms of the diaspora, the importance of Pan-Africanism. We have to collectively, as people of the diaspora, to make sure we come together to protect countries like South Africa and prevent this, what we're seeing, what you described in terms of Starlink, Elon Musk, because once again, this really comes down to wealth. And I mentioned earlier, maintaining a racial caste system. So we can't allow those individuals who are in power now, as you highlighted, to make deals that will impact people generations from now. And I get the pressures from leadership, but when the majority of the wealth in the country is still owned by people who are not native to that land, you can never expect peace or justice. And so, as you said, caving in and allowing, these vulture capitalists basically to come in South Africa and other African nations and to pillage basically once again, which you've already experienced for hundreds of years in Africa and other, countries outside of the country, then once again, you cannot reverse the centuries of damage from capitalism, imperialism that people of African descent, other people from minoritized backgrounds throughout the world has experienced. It is now the time to take a stand. And as you said, if you take this deal, then you will not be able to reverse the centuries of damage, decades of damage you experienced, the Black Afrikaners have experienced in the nation. And once again, you continue the cycle of poverty in a country in which Black folks deserve to live a peaceful life where they have access to resources. But right now, we're not there yet.
Rebecca, final point on this. I get it. I get the desire for investment. I get the need for investment in your country. Africa is 7 of the top 10 economies, fastest growing economies, 7 of those in African nations. The continent of Africa is the youngest population. It needs resources, not philanthropy. But what they cannot do is allow colonialism 2.0. Colonialism 2.0 to me is you're free, meaning you could elect possibly who you want, but then who controls them? And if you control the money, if you control the banks, the ports, the land, the investment, you control all of that, you control the country. You remain poor. And so that 30%, it's 30%. It's not 70% local ownership, 30% foreign, which what it should be. It's, you still gonna own 70. We're requiring 30% of South African investment. That needs to remain. Otherwise, black folks in South Africa will never, ever achieve any economic success.
You know, there's different options that South Africa has, especially with forming coalitions with the BRICS countries, figure out a deal with China. Like right now, China is very transactional. Is China necessarily being a imperialist? Not necessarily, but it's willing to make a deal and make money. South Africa has so many resources. I don't know if it's necessarily even for the South African government to nationalize its mines. I don't know, but I definitely think that South Africa needs to bet on itself. Because that's the future of South Africa.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the current predicament that South Africa is going to be there for the next 100 years.
Yeah, you give it away right now.
That's it.
You can't get it back unless you put caps, unless you say 5-year agreement or whatever. But if you don't have those caps, they're going to look up and foreign companies are going to be making billions off of the country and the people. And what are you getting? Training? You're getting investments in roads, infrastructure? Nah, don't do that deal. Because black folks, we know what that deal looks like post the civil rights movement and how there's been nominal success, but not full economic freedom. Folks, gonna go to a break, come back. More.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.